What do you do when a patient's story unravels everything you've built your career on? When the tools of science, logic, evidence, reason fail to explain the shadows creeping into your own mind? I'm Dr. Elizabeth Marrow, a psychiatrist with 15 years of experience, trained to dissect the human psyche, to find order in chaos. But one case, one patient shattered that order and left me questioning not just my profession, but reality itself. This is the story of Case 347, a man known only as John Doe, whose presence still lingers in the corners of my thoughts like a whisper I can't quite hear. Before we dive into this unsettling account, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It helps me share stories like this, stories that need to be told, no matter how much they haunt me. It was October 12th, 2019, a rainy evening in upstate New York, where the world seemed to blur under a relentless downpour. I was finishing a late shift at St. Augustine's Psychiatric Clinic, a small aging facility nestled in a quiet town surrounded by dense forests and forgotten quarries. The clinic was a place of routine: white walls, the hum of fluorescent lights, the faint smell of antiseptic mingling with the musty scent of old carpet. My office, a cramped room on the second floor, was my sanctuary, its desk cluttered with patient files, a chipped coffee mug, and a lamp that flickered when the storms got bad. That night the air felt heavier than usual, the kind of damp chill that clings to your skin and makes your bones ache. The rain battered the windows, a rhythmic drumming that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I was ready to leave, my coat already on, when Nurse Clara knocked on my door. Her face was pale, her eyes darting as she handed me a thin manila folder. "New admit," she said, her voice clipped. "Police brought him in. He's strange." I glanced at the file, labeled simply John Doe, Case 347. No medical history, no prior admissions, no emergency contact. Just a name, and even that felt like a placeholder. Male, mid-30s, admitted for acute psychosis after being found wandering the edge of town, barefoot and incoherent in the pouring rain. The police report was sparse, noting only that he'd been clutching a crumpled piece of paper, muttering to himself. I opened the folder, and there it was, pinned to the intake form. A single sheet of paper, its edges frayed, covered in jagged, repetitive handwriting. The words were scrawled in black ink, over and over like a mantra. "They see me. They see me. They see me." The police report was sparse, noting only that he'd been clutching a crumpled piece of paper, muttering to himself. I opened the folder, and there it was, pinned to the intake form. A single sheet of paper, its edges frayed, covered in jagged, repetitive handwriting. The words were scrawled in black ink, over and over like a mantra. "They see me. They see me. They see me." The handwriting was erratic, the letters sharp and uneven, as if written in a frenzy. I traced my finger over the words, feeling a strange unease settle in my chest. Who were they? And why did this simple piece of paper feel like it carried more weight than the entire file? I closed the folder, my pulse quickening, and told Clara I'd see him now. Something about this case already felt different, like a puzzle with missing pieces I wasn't sure I wanted to find. I met John in exam room 3, a sterile box of a room with pale green walls and a single window overlooking the parking lot, where rain streaked the glass like tears. He was sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, his head bowed, his damp clothes clinging to his thin frame. His hair was matted, dark with rainwater, and his bare feet were caked with mud, as if he'd walked miles through the wilderness. He didn't look up when I entered, but the air in the room shifted, grew heavier like a held breath. Have you ever walked into a space and felt watched? Not by a person, but by something intangible, something just beyond your senses. That's what I felt, standing there with my clipboard, my pen poised, my training urging me to stay calm, professional, detached. "John," I said, my voice steady despite the unease crawling up my spine. "I'm Dr. Marrow. Can you tell me what brought you here?" Silence. His breathing was shallow, deliberate, each inhale and exhale measured, like he was counting them to anchor himself. I noted his vitals, recorded by the nurse. Pulse 92, blood pressure 130/85, temperature 98.6. Physically, he was stable, unremarkable, but his posture, his stillness, told a different story. I sat across from him, the metal chair creaking under my weight, and tried again. "The police found you near the quarry. Can you tell me what happened?" His head snapped up and I froze. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, the irises a pale gray that seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent light. They weren't just tired, they were haunted, like he hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. He stared at me, through me, and whispered, "They see me through the walls." His voice was low, raspy, each word heavy with a fear I could almost taste. I scribbled a note. Delusions of being watched, possible paranoia, but my hand trembled slightly. I asked about the paper, the writing. He flinched, his fingers twitching, and leaned closer. "They told me to write it," he said. "They're always there, in the corners, in the dark." I pressed gently, following protocol. "Who are they, John? Can you describe them?" He shook his head, his gaze darting to the corners of the room, as if expecting to see something there. "Shadows," he said. "Not people. Not alive. But they see me. They know." His words were fragmented, but they carried a weight that made my skin prickle. I noted his symptoms: auditory and visual hallucinations, disorganized speech, possible delusional disorder, but something didn't fit. His fear was too specific, too vivid, like he was describing something real, something he'd seen with his own eyes. Over the next week, I met with John daily, each session a careful dance between my training and the growing unease I couldn't shake. The clinic was quiet during those late shifts. The hallways dim, the only sounds the hum of the HVAC system and the occasional creak of the building settling. John's room was at the end of the corridor, and every time I approached it, I felt a chill, like the temperature dropped a few degrees. I told myself it was the drafty old building, but the feeling lingered like a shadow trailing me. John's story emerged in fragments, each piece more unsettling than the last. He spoke of them as shadows that moved just outside his vision, figures that flickered in his peripheral sight. They didn't speak in words, he said, but in feelings: cold dread, paralyzing fear, a sense of being hunted. "They're always there," he told me during our second session, his hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly his knuckles whitened. "In the walls, in the air, in my head." I asked if he heard voices, a standard question for psychosis. He shook his head. "Not voices, it's heavier, like they're pressing on me, watching, waiting." I ran through the differential diagnoses: schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, drug-induced psychosis, even a rare presentation of temporal lobe epilepsy. I ordered a full workup: blood tests, tox screen, MRI, EEG. The results came back clean. No drugs, no structural abnormalities, no seizure activity. Physically, John was a blank slate, a healthy man in his mid-30s with no medical history to explain his state. But his mental state was deteriorating. He ate sparingly, picking at his food as if it tasted wrong. He slept in fits, waking with a start, his eyes scanning the room, and every session that same phrase: "They see me." I began to notice details that didn't add up. John's clothes, the ones he'd been admitted in, were unremarkable: jeans, a worn jacket, a plain t-shirt. But they were oddly pristine, despite the mud on his feet. No tears, no stains beyond the rain, as if they'd been freshly laundered before his aimless wandering. And the paper, that crumpled sheet with its frantic writing, was made of heavy stock, almost archival quality. Not the cheap notebook paper you'd expect. I sent it for analysis, hoping for fingerprints or some clue to his identity. The lab found nothing, no prints, not even John's, just the ink, black and unremarkable, and those words repeated like a warning. By day 5, I was obsessed. John's case was consuming me, creeping into my thoughts during quiet moments, my dreams filled with shadows and whispers. I requested the security footage from the night he was admitted, hoping for context. The police had found him near the old quarry, a derelict site a mile outside town, abandoned since the 1980s after a series of accidents locals still whispered about. The quarry was a place of superstition, avoided after dark, its jagged cliffs and dark pits the stuff of ghost stories. I'd never given those stories much thought. Psychiatry deals in facts, not folklore, but John's case was making me question everything. The footage arrived on a USB drive, grainy and time-stamped October 12, 2019, 9:32 p.m. I watched it alone in my office, the rain still falling outside, the lamp casting flickering shadows across the walls. There was John, staggering along a rural road near the quarry, his movements jerky, his head turning as if startled by something behind him. He was alone, or so it seemed. At the 2:17 mark, I paused the video, my breath catching. In one frame, just for a split second, there was a flicker behind him, a shape too tall, too thin to be human, its edges blurred like a smudge on the lens. I rewound, played it again. The shape was there, then gone, like a glitch in the footage. My heart pounded. Was it a trick of the light? A camera artifact? I zoomed in, but the resolution was too low to tell. All I knew was that it didn't belong. I showed the footage to a colleague, Dr. Patel, a neurologist with a knack for spotting patterns. He frowned, adjusted his glasses, and watched it 3 times. Could be a shadow, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Or something else. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. I didn't want to admit how much that fleeting image unnerved me, how it mirrored John's descriptions too closely. By the end of the first week, the case was unraveling in ways I couldn't explain. John's file began to behave strangely. I kept it locked in my office, a habit born of years handling sensitive patient data, but I'd find it misplaced, on a shelf, under a stack of unrelated papers, once even open on my desk, as if someone had been reading it. I checked the lock. It was intact. I asked the staff, Clara, the night nurses, even the janitor. No one had touched it. Then, on day 8, I found a new note in the margins of John's intake form, scrawled in red ink. They see you too. The handwriting was close to mine, eerily so, but I hadn't written it. I compared it to my own notes, my signature. The strokes were similar, but the pressure was different, heavier, as if written by a trembling hand. I locked the file in a drawer and started keeping my office door bolted, even during the day. The clinic itself began to feel different. The fluorescent lights flickered more often, casting brief shadows that seemed to move just out of sight. The air grew colder, especially near John's room, a chill that no amount of heat could dispel. I checked the thermostat. It read 72 degrees, yet my breath fogged in the air. The staff noticed it too, though no one spoke of it directly. Clara started avoiding John's room, sending junior nurses instead. "He gives me the creeps," she admitted one night over coffee, her eyes darting to the hallway. "It's like something's watching." I dismissed it as collective stress, the kind that spreads in close-knit teams under pressure. But I couldn't ignore the physical evidence. One night I found scratches on the walls of John's room, faint but deep, like claw marks. He'd been restrained after an outburst, so how had he done it? I took photos, documented them in the file, but when I checked the next day, the scratches were gone, the wall smooth as if nothing had happened. I asked maintenance, they hadn't touched it. My photos, stored on my phone, were corrupted, the images replaced with static. By the second week, John was deteriorating rapidly. He refused to eat, claiming the food tasted like ash, spitting out even the blandest meals. His weight dropped, his cheeks hollowing, but his eyes remained sharp, almost too sharp. Like they saw things I couldn't. He scratched at the walls during sessions, his nails bloody, muttering about their eyes behind the plaster. "They're in there," he said, pointing to the wall behind me. "Watching. Always watching." I turned, half expecting to see something, but there was only the faded paint, the faint hum of the lights. I ordered a sedative, hoping to calm him enough for a coherent session, but on the night of October 19th, when the nurse went to administer it, John was gone. His room was empty, the bed neatly made, the window locked from the inside. No alarms had triggered, no cameras had caught him leaving. On the bed was that piece of paper, the one with his frantic writing, now with a single new word in the same red ink as the note in his file. "Run." I stood there, staring at the word, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it over the rain outside. The air in the room was freezing, my breath visible, and for a moment I swear I heard it, a faint whisper, like static but alive, curling around the edges of my perception. I reported John's disappearance to the police, but their search was perfunctory. "He's a drifter," the officer said, shrugging. "Probably back on the streets." But I knew better. John hadn't just left. He'd vanished, leaving behind a void filled with questions. I kept his file against protocol and began my own investigation. I revisited the quarry footage frame by frame, searching for more anomalies. I found another flicker, this one at the 3:04 mark, a shadow that moved too smoothly, too deliberately to be a glitch. I cross-referenced police reports from the quarry, digging into old records. There were stories, accidents in the 80s, workers who claimed to see things in the pits, whispers of lights that moved without a source. Most were dismissed as folklore, but one report from 1987 described a worker who vanished, leaving behind a notebook filled with the same phrase, "They see me." I visited the quarry myself on October 25, 2019, against every rational instinct. It was midnight, the sky clear for the first time in weeks, the stars sharp above the jagged cliffs. The air was still, too still, the silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. I carried a flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating the rocky ground littered with rusted tools and broken stone. I walked the path John had taken, my boots crunching on gravel, my breath loud in my ears. At the edge of the main pit I stopped. The darkness below was absolute, a void that seemed to swallow the light. And then I heard it, a whisper, faint but undeniable, like voices overlapping, not in words but in feeling, fear, dread, the sense of being seen. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment I saw something in the trees, a shape, tall and thin, its edges blurred. I ran, my heart pounding, not stopping until I was back in my car, the doors locked, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. 5 years have passed since John Doe vanished, but his case remains an open wound. I've locked his file in a safe, but I can't lock away the memories, the cold air, the flickering lights, the whispers that followed me home. I've gone over every detail, every note, every frame of footage. I've consulted colleagues, paranormal researchers, even a local historian who told me the quarry was built on land once considered cursed by the indigenous tribes who lived here centuries ago. None of it explains what happened, but it all points to something beyond my training, beyond science. I'm a psychiatrist. I deal in diagnoses, in evidence, in the measurable workings of the mind, but John's case defies all of that. Was he delusional, caught in a web of psychosis so vivid it infected me too? Or did he see something real, something that crossed the line between our world and something else? The paper, the footage, the scratches, their evidence, but of what? Every time I close my eyes, I see his face, those grey eyes staring through me, and I hear that whisper. They see you too. I've changed since that case. I double-check locks, avoid dark places, jump at shadows. I've stopped working late shifts, moved to a private practice in a brighter, newer building, but the feeling follows me. The weight, the cold, the sense of being watched. I've tried to rationalize it, stress, suggestion, the power of a patient's delusion to unsettle even a trained mind. But deep down, I know there's more. Something saw John, and now it sees me. Have you ever encountered something you couldn't explain? A moment, a feeling, a glimpse of something that made you question reality? Share your story in the comments below. I read every one, and I need to know I'm not alone. If this case has left you as unsettled as it's left me, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the edges of what we understand. I'll keep digging, keep searching for answers, even if they scare me. Because some mysteries don't let you go. They see you, and they never look away.